Hello, welcome back to The Inner. Today I'm joined by Ryan Cropper. Hi, Ryan. How are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. Feeling pretty good. Pretty awake.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's great. If you could introduce yourself a bit, tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Ooh. Uh, I've been on YouTube since 2013, I think. Maybe 2011, not too sure. Started off by making videos on blogs, basically how to write blogs, stuff like that. And then I got a little bored, to be honest with you. And so I ended up just kind of leaving my YouTube channel on the back burner until eventually I started having some supernatural experiences. Then I started to use my channel as a kind of diary. People wanted to know how I was inducing these supernatural experiences. And so I decided to make tutorials, tacking them on the end, sometimes in between my stories, as well as making an entire playlist dedicated towards how to do the same thing. After some years of giving out free advice, people wanted to speak to me in private. And so I started doing free counseling sessions where I'll just give them advice on how to get to these states of mind. Many of them have to do with you raising your frequency so that you can become a match for these types of experiences. If you're depressed, if you're going through something, the signals don't fire off in the brain so easily, so they can't get to where they need to be to have the same type of experiences. So I ended up teaching personal development as well, but having a little bit of a spiritual element to it for the main reason just to like prime the audience so they're able to then resonate properly to then be able to do the same things. But yeah, I started teaching. Well, one client called it spiritual life coaching alongside these abilities. You know, they go hand in hand. And then after a while of doing that for free, I had no time for myself. Then people started paying for it just to kind of climb over each other. And then about 4 years went by. I realized I wasn't paying taxes and I wasn't registered as a business. So my best client at the time, she had so many calls, said, "You know, you're kind of a spiritual life coach. You should kind of name yourself that in order to register as a business." And so I did. And I've been doing that ever since. I would like to kind of shift gears a little bit into something else.
Hmm.
I'm finding other areas of creativity to be more pleasing to me. I'm not sure how long I'm going to be on YouTube for anymore. I kind of want things to become more private when it comes to my spiritual life and kind of put a kind of wedge between me and the internet. But at the moment, I'm still around and I'm still here. Yeah.
Okay, that's pretty cool. So, if you could kind of narrate for us, how'd you really get into, how'd your spiritual journey kind of begin and how did it progress?
Kind of felt like something that had always been happening from the moment I was born. I remember being born. I remember being in the incubator. I think I was about 4 months premature. I think sometimes my mom says 5, but she changes her mind every now and then. And I was born with a very aware sense of, I guess, mind. You know, like I was aware in the incubator. I could see my dad. I knew he was my dad. I could see all the drama that was happening, and I knew why it was happening. I understood everything everyone was saying. I wasn't taught English yet. I just came out the womb. I was fresh, and yet I had the mind of someone that had lived before, and that stayed that way for a few years. And whilst that was happening, I was being visited by, at the time, I didn't have a name for them. They just were like glowy people, you know, in the middle of the night that would peek over and look at me, speak to me. A lot of them I already knew. I had this weird relationship with them. They were very, very, very familiar. And then as I started learning English, math, and all of the other mandatory classes in England, I started to forget some things, which was weird. A lot of what I was born kind of automatically knowing started going out the window. Not all of it, but a decent amount of it. I also had some abilities back then that got squelched through all of the learning of the, I guess, the human ways, the ways of life. Yeah, it's very strange. It could be that a certain part of my brain was most active when I was born. They say that we're born in theta, and we're like that for a while. So it could be that I was accessing that information in this very nice young state of mind. And that when I started thinking a lot, I shifted to the more alpha, wakeful states of mind and beta states of mind, which then disconnected me. I'm just theorizing here, but yeah. And then as I got older, when I started seeing TV, I started having an idea as to what it was that I was looking at. I started realizing that a lot of the things I was looking at must come from outer space, or perhaps they come from the cartoon shows I watched because they look similar. Sometimes they're 2D, sometimes they're that cartoony. Uh, Most times there was a large period where they would be quite dead looking. You know, like, see the rib cage, the gaunt faces, and it's because I was seeing dead people. I had no clue that there were, I guess you can say, a kind of not classing system because there's no value in being dead, but there were humans, spirit guides, and ghosts, and then the other things, the more darker things. I just thought everyone all existed on the same plane, and the things I was communicating to, other people could communicate to. But my mom, at one point, she came into the living room, and she walked past this woman that would often stand in the hallway most of the time when me and my brother were watching TV. And so that's when I realized that she couldn't see the dead folk that I was looking at, and everything else. Whenever I would talk about things I was speaking to that would help me go to sleep at night, she would just kind of brush it off like it was imaginary. And at one point, she said it was imaginary. And I went to the doctor, and he said it's all made up, and I was being influenced by the TV. But I was seeing these things before I watched TV. You know what I mean? And so it's like they couldn't give me an answer. Then I became 13, and my mind really changed. So many different colors in there, so many different thought patterns and behaviors. And all of a sudden, it was like someone corked all of my abilities. And along with it, a bunch of memories got suppressed as well of interacting with these beings. And then when I turned 16, I drowned in a local quarry. Well, actually, it wasn't local, it was quite far away, but I drowned and I died. I then came back because I wanted to come back. There's some debate about that. A lot of people argue with me, saying that maybe spirit guides did it, but no, they were actually all for me leaving. I wanted to come back for my own reasons. I'll give you the abridged version, but essentially I died. About 2 weeks after I came back, I started remembering some of the suppressed memories. I worked with the suppressed memories. I came up with my own memory regression technique to bring more of them to the surface. And whilst observing all of these memories of seeing dead people, spirit guides, reading people's minds, what ended up happening was I ended up inadvertently leaving my body. At the time, I didn't know what it was, so I thought I teleported out of my bed. But the reason why this happened was because I was recalling memories where I would astral project without knowing as a kid. Most of the experiences where I saw these spirit guides or dead people were because I was out of body. But when I was young, I had no clue. Again, I just thought these things just existed all on one plane. Everyone could interact with them. And most times I would just lay down, blink. Sometimes I wouldn't even blink. I would just transition to another plane. So I had no idea as to what was happening to me. I just thought I was still awake, you know? And so as I'm recalling all these memories, my body can't tell the difference between the past and that now moment as I'm recalling the memories. And so when I go to bed, again, this is about 2 weeks after I drowned. When I go to bed, I end up astral projecting because my body has been convinced that I was in an astral projection state due to recalling astral projection memories. You see what I mean? So I kind of woke up the ability again because my body couldn't tell the difference between the past experiences and that present moment. However, the way I brought it about was due to fear and anxiety, because a lot of the memories I recalled were centered around fear and anxiety. I needed a method of practice that wasn't going to traumatize me every time I needed to leave my body. So I got to work from the ages of 16 to 18 on coming up with so many different variations of astral projection techniques through just memory regression and really studying the environment at the time that caused me to astral project and trying to recreate it, but in a nicer fashion so that I, again, wouldn't be anxious or afraid because of those circumstances. And I can talk about that more later if you want, like what triggered it during those times. But essentially, I needed a better way of leaving my body where I wasn't in a very uncomfortable state. I figured it out. I created a 10-step conditioning process that I use for myself first and foremost. And I did that up until the age of about 20. At that point, I could just leave whenever I wanted. I could just slide out and spend a lot of time in the astral plane. The uptick of videos showed up on my YouTube channel, as well as the advice videos. I got into other stuff later on, but I did notice that astral projection brought back that level of awareness I was born with. And the more I astral projected, the less of an ego I had. Not in a negative sense, although I know that there are parts of me back then that were quite negative. We get impressioned by the world and the people around us. But the character that I had, the character that you need for this dream, started disappearing because I kept leaving the dream. So every time you leave the dream, this reality, this dimensional plane, you become more of how you actually are and you think more like you, which is an awareness. It's the same awareness that stays the same every time you go to sleep and have a series of dreams in succession. That one part of your awareness that doesn't change character is you. So as you leave the body, you become this main kind of cornerstone of you, of your soul. And so my character changed a lot. People noticed it in college quite a bit. I changed my clothes quite a bit. I stopped speaking the way I was speaking. And now we were seeing a character that I kind of settled with because it's easy to communicate with. It's easy to reach a large audience. People tend to respond to it fairly well. And again, because of that growth spurt of awareness that came about because of the astral projection experiences, I started seeing spirituality in everything. I started seeing a deeper depth behind what most people would call normal. So after leaving college, even going to work at normal jobs, I started seeing them from a more spiritual perspective. It's like a whole new world kind of opened up to me. Not just the spiritual world, but also how the third dimension plays a role in the totality of spirituality, our spiritual experience. It's still, there we go, I'm focusing out. I was going to try something in a sec. I'm trying to fix this, but it's still changing. I'm still being shown layers and layers of what life is. And yeah, at the moment, I'm trying to develop other abilities too. But that's kind of a quick over the bridge type thing.
Okay, that's pretty cool. So, one of the things that usually comes up when people are encountering the astral plane is the information, the people that they meet, the beings that they run into. One of the first videos that I ran across, I think it might have been how I found your channel, was you mentioning that you had an encounter with Anubis. Now, I'm not going to ask you about that because that's already on YouTube. Instead, I'd like to hear some of your experiences with other figures, maybe some of the Chinese figures. I do believe I remember hearing you say that they're quite plentiful in the astral plane.
Yeah, geishas, the classic painted faces with the black teeth and kimono. They're an entity. They're not, or rather, they are entities. They're not people that have passed on looking that way. They're very much like creatures. Not so much outside appearance-wise, because they can pass as human, but their behaviors kind of show it quite a bit. How they move and smile and look and move their eyes around. It's very creepy. But they're not necessarily things to be feared. They're seen as deities by a lot of people who pass on. So a lot of the times, people who have passed, especially in Asia, mainly the places in the world that believe in these forms, this form of deity, you know what I mean? You tend to go wherever you believe you should a lot of the times in the astral plane, at least after a certain processing phase, after dying. But let's say these people who believe in geishas, so you'll actually see one. It's not a figment of your imagination. They're there, and you'll go to a certain plane where they exist. It's a fairy dimension, a fey dimension. You don't see little fairies with wings flying around. Instead, you see them as energy, and every other creature there looks very much like some type of polymorphic being that can shift its shape, reflect a lot of light. They only really start to take on these forms like fairies when they start to shift over to the astral plane and our realm as well, because they tend to take on a different body. But saying that these geishas, they live there along with frogs with beards, and they also wear clothes, different types of animals as well. I'm sure bison that are standing on 2 feet. You'll see a lot of strange things that are often depicted in a lot of the illustrations in China. I could confidently say they all exist, although I haven't met all of them, just because I've met so many things around the world that I kind of just chalk it up to everything exists at this point. But basically, there'll be this line, this queue of dead people, and they'll have in their possession certain items that they feel are valuable. And what they have to do is give it to this geisha when it's their time in order to receive safe passage to the afterlife. I'm using that term loosely because they're not doing it just to be safe. They're doing it as, well, it's their golden ticket. It's their payment, for this deity's help. Problem is, and these geishas can also give you wishes. Perhaps someone who's passed on wants to make sure their daughter or son has a good life topside. They could, give it a good word to the geisha. But the problem is people lining up, they don't know what's valuable. I watch so many people with gold in their hands, jewels and trinkets that mean nothing to this geisha. I skipped the queue and looked at the geisha, and I was watching this old woman with her comb that was given to her by her mum, and that was given to her by her mum. It's like a generational item. This thing, when she gave it over to the geisha, had so much emotional weight to it. You could feel the history.
Mm-hmm.
Then she smiled, and she took that. She feeds on it. It gives her a sensation of feeling alive and human because she can't cross over to this world. That old woman, she got to where she needed to be. Everyone else that didn't think like her, they didn't go to hell or anything. They just kind of got duped. The geisha takes it, sends them down the wrong path. They got to figure it out for themselves. Maybe like a forest that's all burnt down or something like that, or a completely different plane entirely. Yeah, where they go after that, she doesn't really care so much. But they're like that. Geishas don't like humans. She definitely didn't like me. She was very like dismissive and almost like I was fecal matter, like just pile of crap. Really didn't like me, and I kind of got the impression that a lot of beings there didn't like people. A lot of the geishas and these more divine entities that people pray to over here. And so I saw next to her a guru-looking man with white eyes. He seemed more down to earth. So I just sat next to him and I decided having a conversation with him, asking him about, well, what did he learn in terms of the big questions? What is our universe made out of? What are we as a soul? Where do we come from? And he was just talking. I can't remember a whole lot what he was talking about, because usually during the astral projection experiences, I choose to remember highlights, because then I'll move on to the next astral plane or I'll start doing other things. And so, yeah, it's not common for me to remember the entire thing if I'm out for a very, very long period of time. So I kind of glazed over intentionally a lot of things he was saying. But yeah, Asian deities, they look interesting. It's the same thing for Balinese deities. They're dressed in ceremonial garments, maybe a grass-like dress, a mask where you don't see their face at all. Sometimes you don't even notice that they're wearing a mask because maybe the shoulder pads will go up way over the head and they'll be headless or something like that. And they have knives for fingers and they move really quickly. In Wales, I saw leprechauns and other types of fairies that literally left trails of light behind them as they were moving throughout the place we were staying at the time. It's like this Airbnb in the middle of nowhere that was circular, very fairy-like space to be in.
Mhm.
And those guys just kept laughing at us, stopping us from getting sleep because they're annoying. You'll find a lot of these types of beings, the reputation that they have, they actually carry. And so, yeah, yeah.
So, have you had any encounters with, let's say, Greek or Roman entities?
Yeah. I had a couple I didn't really trust. Good question, actually, because I didn't mention this in my YouTube channel. Uh, One time I astral projected and went through a portal. I was going through a lot of different tiny little portals because I'm a very scientific person. I like seeing physics. And when you astral project, you get to see quantum physics. You get to travel through atoms, the nucleus of an atom. And in there is a large world that looks like sacred geometry. And there are different types of beings there that look like little lights that float around, kind of like when you hit your head or you stand up too fast. But they're much bigger. They're like this, size of a basketball. And I remember going down a specific portal within the nucleus of an atom after seeing these light beings that wanted me to go down a different path. And they were being very sneaky because I felt that if I was to go down that path, I wouldn't be able to come back to my body. Like they were trying to trick me. So I jumped down the other portal instead. I found myself coming to, where was I? I think I just materialized on their front lawn. Yeah, because there were two occasions where I went there unexpectedly. And I always show up outside first, I noticed. Big house, like a mansion, very aesthetically pleasing. Looked very nice, very white and very gold. Kind of like the Greeks made it, but they had a certain alien type flair to it. Not so much crystals everywhere or high tech technology, more so think more so Marvel movies, Thor, his place, but kind of tone it down a little bit.
Yeah, like a
And
less techie Asgard.
yeah, yeah, it was floating in the sky. I'll tell you that. It was one big piece of land that was just floating there. I walked into the front door. Again, this is kind of spotty because it was a while ago. But what I can vaguely remember is seeing my face in a mirror, like a white guy that was probably around 5 foot, 5'10", maybe 5'9". Looked very old with blue eyes. Was not attractive in any sense of the word. So, for those who think that all Greek gods look pretty, no. Uh, and at the time, I was like, okay, this is weird. I was kind of panicking a little bit. I was like, why do it look like this? And to my left, I noticed the living room was massive, and there was a whole group of people just sitting there looking at me, kind of like they all had their own individual relationships to me that I couldn't remember. They didn't like me a whole lot. Then this older guy came up from behind me, big dude, uh, big beard, blue eyes, piercing, small and round in the head. You know, he had a lot of wrinkles, but still quite a tight body. And he took me by the shoulder, took me outside, and said that I was called Quinn, which I looked up isn't a Greek name. I have my suspicions about this experience. I'll tell you why in a sec. But he said that my name was Quinn and that I was a god in a past life. And then he showed me a rack inside the house. He kind of turned to the house and showed me a rack full of different items. And he said, these are our weapons. This one's yours. Mine had a whole bunch of dust on it, cobwebs, you name it. And these were technological weapons that could control the elements. They couldn't do it necessarily themselves, although they were quite strong. And so it probably helped them wield the weapons. But he picked up mine and he showed me how to use it on the front lawn. I kept asking him if he was real. You know, I didn't really want to be manipulated. I know that there are a lot of beings out there, sorry, that like to find mortals and pump their head up full of gas to try and get them to trust in them, to do things for them, stuff like that. And at this point in my life, I kind of come across a lot of beings like that. So I never believed him. I still kind of don't believe him. And I just left. I just left the house. Some years later, I actually projected for a moment. I think this was only like a couple of years ago, actually. I actually projected for just a moment, and I found myself sitting on the edge of the lawn again, looking over at the clouds in the city below me, like some type of place in the States.
Mm-hmm.
And he was just sitting there, just looking at me. He didn't say anything this time, he just smiled. And I just felt this overwhelming presence of love. Not necessarily the light and love, or rather the love and light love, more like a family kind of love. And I said, that's strange. And then I came back to my body. So there's probably some type of tie there. My suspicion was maybe he was a spirit guide or some type of entity that liked me and either chose to look like that and come up with that whole theme to be more presentable towards me, or I don't know, maybe he's something else. Maybe he's what he says he is. But yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I'm familiar with your story of Anubis. Do you have any other, I guess, encounters with the Egyptians at all?
Are they harpies? You just Google it. There's a certain creature that I met. I think it is a harpy. Yeah, I met a harpy once in Egypt. I was on a bridge, a small bridge, very small bridge, and there was a cart coming underneath the bridge. It was nighttime, and it wasn't a city or anything. It looked pretty old. A lot of things were made out of brick. But there were Egyptians. Well, I guess they were kind of royalty. Maybe they were soldiers. They seemed pretty stiff and on guard. And the people that were coming underneath the bridge seemed kind of important. Their job was to come under, go under the arch to the main building to meet whoever it was that they were supposed to meet. But whilst I was sitting there thinking I was invisible, this giant bird, black, with a woman's head, comes along and grabs my shoulders and picks me up, flies me away. I didn't feel any malice or any evil from this hybrid. A lot of people say they're bad, but not this one. She sat me down. She said some of them can see you. I guess back then a lot of people practice magic, ceremonial magic perhaps, and they had the ability to see people that had either passed on or who were actually projecting. A couple of times that's happened where people from the Middle East can see me. Sometimes they try to grab me as if they believe wholeheartedly that they can capture me. So I wonder if perhaps they could and put me in a bottle somewhere.
Yeah, I've had a experience like that. It kind of launched me into understanding body, soul, and spirit, where I met this guy in Kailash. And when he prayed for me, I noticed that he grabbed my spiritual body with his physical hands, and that caught my attention because normally you can't do that. And it was me understanding the unification of the three in that moment, which then led me to a bunch of other encounters of, well, if you get them to work together, they kind of give you access to the other worlds that they're kind of made for. And I was just someone who fully mastered that.
Very cool.
So what would you say are some of the keys to spiritual advancement? Or I guess you could also couple that with, what do you believe are some of the things that keeps people from advancing spiritually?
Good question. Mental health. I'm just going to turn on my light so that this doesn't keep defocusing. It's because the camera can't see my face properly. One sec. There you go. It should be better. Mental health. How you think.
Mm-hmm.
If you're attached to living a certain type of lifestyle, you don't have any energy for anything else. Well, so you tend to become the thing that you're focusing on. And so if you're a part of the world, you act and think like the people of the world. So they're into iPhones, Teslas, YouTube, TikTok, sex, excessive amounts of food. Have you ever heard of red room parties?
Yes.
Yeah, it's almost like people in the world have become, what would you say? Who are the people that go to parties? What would you call them? People that arrive at parties. Not hosts. Do you know what I mean?
Guests.
Guests. Yeah, very comfortable guests. It's almost like everyone in the world has become guests of these red host parties, but you're not in a room. You're in your country. You're living like these people in these parties. There's a room where they gluttonously just eat food that's really expensive and don't care about the food. How many times do you see TikTok videos where people do that? And they eat something and then they throw it away and they just get up and leave. It was just for the gram or the TikTok reel. And then sex is the same way. How people speak to each other, there's a certain room, I believe it's yellow, I could be wrong, where everyone just talks crap about each other behind their back and they intentionally instigate that. Actually, might be the red one. But it's horrible. People who are usually best friends in the celebrity world, apparently that's how it's perceived, just go at each other in this one room. Nasty things they say to each other. People do that here too. It's almost like the influences in those red room or the influencers in those red room are being influenced into this type of way. And then they're introducing that type of influence to the world and the people who plugged into social media. It's kind of weird. I forgot why I said that. What was your question?
We were talking about spiritual advancement and things that
There we
can
go.
kind of hold people back.
So if you're plugged into that way of living, it feeds the body in such a carnal way and detaches you so much from certain higher ways of thinking and being that it cuts off abilities pretty quickly. Again, you become the thing that you're focused on. And so if all you're focused on is food or sex, then all you become is a very horny person who's probably got a whole social media presence around that activity in your life, who eats a lot of food. And usually you don't get that together. Usually it's one or the other, mukbang or OnlyFans. And so it's like, I know for a fact that people are being influenced into these directions, but I believe 100% it's the influence that stops people from spiritually advancing. The identity that they have, because their brain has now become wired to accepting these states of being. Like they see value in it, so they don't want to get rid of it. They also identify with the very thing that they're addicted to that's capping them off, spiritually speaking. And the worst thing I see are people that say they're spiritual, yet they're the complete opposite. The complete opposite. I think it's a very clever way of, because there is such a thing as spiritual warfare, entities influencing people into thinking that they're super spiritual, but they're actually the complete opposite. And
Yeah.
it's easy to see, especially when you're around these types of people, because they're doing all the things that these other people around the world that are stuck to are doing, like excessive sex and excessive eating and gossiping and all these other problems that block chakras, prevent energy flow in the body, and stop you from manifesting abilities. You have to stop it all, which is quite simple if you think about how you were when you were a kid. It's just going back to your original state. I've noticed in the Bible, Proverbs, a lot of the information there actually has people go back to that state if they're open to reading it. But some people aren't. And so it's problematic there too. Yeah.
Okay. So, what does spirituality look like for you on a regular basis? What's your engagement like?
Someone asked me that recently in another interview. I gave him an explanation which wasn't really grounded. So I'll try my best here, but. Ooh, okay. So I've said for a while, and a lot of people have, they could either see this perspective or they somewhat experience it, which is interesting. You can tell me if you know what I'm saying here. I've said for a while that it feels like I'm in the past, like I'm living in a memory. Like this right now is a memory. And that the future is where I'm actually at. Sounds like I'm off my meds, but it feels like I'm maybe 3 months behind or no, more years ahead of where I actually am here now. And that I'm stuck in a memory. And that because of this, when things happen here, I'm not surprised because I already know they're going to happen. It's just the past, you know? And I've had this kind of idea that's it kind of showed up in my head one time when I was really engaged with astral projection and speaking to beings that existed outside of time and space. And it's happened again on a few occasions with psychedelics as well. This same type of headspace, which is that none of us are actually in the present moment. We're all existing in the past. The present is actually what we call future. And that's us rendering in this experience for us to perceive. It's very bizarre and weird. But my worldview, my spiritual worldview, in a sense, is that this is a memory. And I can feel the mind behind this memory that's thinking, it's creating everything. I can interact with it. I can get it to do things for me. Or if I ask for something, it will, I guess, 10, well, now I can say confidently 10 times out of 10, give me something. Back in the past, it was all incumbent on my connection to this mind behind everything. You know, people say that we're all a part of one being dreaming up reality, and I 100% agree with that. And I feel like I'm constantly interfacing with it, and these abilities. Every time you develop a new one or you experience one, it kind of feels like you're in a lucid dream. You get access to more of this world, and you can do more with it. As well as saying earlier that everything feels spiritual, even if it's a job. If it's a job that you think is very mundane or boring, it feels like it was given to you by a higher power on purpose to show you something about yourself
Mm-hmm.
or to show you how to grow in a certain area of your life or your personality or to give you a break, you know? I remember one time I wanted a managerial job. I had the qualifications and everything, but I didn't get it. Instead, they gave it to someone else and gave me a job in catering. And I didn't want that job in catering. It was too easy. It seemed boring. I did it anyway. Probably about day two, I realized why I was given that job. It was actually the best job I've ever had. In that it was very calm. Everyone there was nice. It was like one big family. I could do everything there so easily because it wasn't too much. It was just enough. And I had room to manage people around me. It showed me a lot about myself and about people. And I'm grateful for it 100%. So I guess I could say 9 times out of 10, it gives me what I want. Something, the extra 1%, it gives me what it knows I need. But it's not like I kind of had this slight feeling of this mind. It literally shows up in my dreams. It can literally speak to me. It's the more I'm connected to it and I talk about these experiences, the more crazy people think I am. Whenever I kind of softened it a little bit and just left it to synchronicities, people accepted it 100%. But when I say, oh, I told to God I had a dream last night and he told me exactly what to do, told him the presence that it comes with. I said that I don't actually see it in the dream. It just controls the whole dream and it feels like it's a presence behind me. The dream is tinted blue and silver every time, and it has a whole lot of effect over the dream. It shows me things in succession. It will keep answering prayers or anything I have to ask it. It's interesting. But spirituality nowadays, it's this mind that's behind everything. Yeah. And kind of feeling like I'm on a ride or on some type of I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I get it.
like you're waiting, you're going through something, an experience, but like yeah, like you sit in on a movie, and it's like maybe 30 minutes in.
Yeah. It
Yeah,
perpetually feels like we're waiting for the movie to end, but it keeps
yeah,
going.
like you know it's gonna end because you know it's written to end at some point, and it's probably ended so many times before, and you woke up out of it. You know, like
Yeah.
a
It's like
simulation.
being in the middle of a play and you don't know your lines, but you're kind of remembering the script as you go along.
So usually, if you're tapped in to what New Agers call spirit, what Christians call the Holy Spirit, they're the same thing. It tells you your lines, and in Tibetan Buddhism,
Uh,
they also talk about the same thing. They talk about it in a very interesting way. They say
Parama
that
Atman.
uh, maybe, but they look at it as the universe has a use for everyone, and if you're not listening to it, if you're not doing what it designed you to do, you become a rusty cog. It'll spit you out, and that's their explanation for people who die quickly. You know, and so it's like listening to this mind that's making you a certain way on purpose so that you can do what it asks you to do. Otherwise, according to them, bad things happen. And I've kind of
Okay.
seen that show up in my life as well. Like if I'm not doing my job, things get taken from me. I noticed.
Yeah. I remember listening to another teacher recently. You familiar with Bobby Hemmett?
Mm-mm.
Okay. He's not for the faint of heart. So if you don't know who he is, I wouldn't recommend looking him up per se.
Do you like? Is he on
But
YouTube? How do you spell his name?
yeah, he's Hemmett, Hemmitt. So yeah, I'm like, he's not for the faint of heart.
You say Bobby
But one
Hemmett?
of the things that he said is that oftentimes when people start having, you notice that spiritual teachers after a while start having these scandals or they start dying and they get decrepit. It's usually because they own some foolery at that particular moment, that they're no longer doing what they were designed to do. And that
Yeah.
kind of ended up being his story after a while, where he kind of gave up. He finished teaching back in 2013 and said, I think I've taught everything I needed to. And then it was after that he had a stroke. Now he's still alive, but
Okay. Well.
he ended up fulfilling the same paradigm that he gifted, is that pretty much once people stop doing what they're made to do, they start to break down. But he's like, you're actually invincible while in your identity and in your destiny.
Two things on that. One, there was this Christian pastor who gave a sermon that he said was going to be his last sermon, and he gave it his all. He wasn't tired, but he
Mhm.
just said what he needed to say, and he said that this was his last one. He died 2 hours later on the way back home. The heart issue. I think it was a heart attack. It's done. In the book Breaking the Death Habit by Leonard Orr, he goes to India, and they mention how to become immortal, you need to have reasons to be alive. Otherwise, you
Mhm.
signal to the body it's time to break down, and you age fast, and you die. There was an interesting experiment done by I forget who did it, but the individual Joe Dispenza brought it out of the kind of filing cabinet and told it to the world. It was an experiment whereby which I think it was 4 American soldiers were captured by I think it was Korean soldiers in Vietnam. And they were put in a room with no windows, and they were fed false propaganda about them losing the war. America lost the war, everyone's dead, all your loved ones are dead. And they would have bets on when someone was going to die, because as soon as they gave up hope, as soon as they didn't have a reason to live anymore, precisely 72 hours later, they would die. And so, like, okay, he lost his will to live. They start wagering, and so it's very interesting. Some while ago, I was very young. I asked it. I prayed. I don't know what else my prayer, if it was an entity or this spirit or what, but I asked how to live forever, and it said just want to be alive. Just a very simple answer, uh, and I felt it too. Like, oh, you need to want to be around. And then I remembered, being a kid for Christmas, Even my kid, she wakes up in the morning, she wants to be up. She's like running around, playing. She's excited for the day. We lose that when we become adults. We don't want it. We
Yeah.
want to stay in bed. We don't want to. We don't want to do anything anymore. You know. And so I think here's the thing. I think God, call it universe, call it the absolute. I've heard recently it's being called that. I think it gives you exactly what you ask for, but it'll give it to you in the ways that you're able to receive it in. It's all one big answer. It's just some people, if they're cut off from it, they don't listen to it. But yeah, going back to your last question about what cuts people off or what stops people on their spiritual journey, I think it is really just cutting themselves off by doing the wrong things.
Yeah. Because, yeah, see, maybe hearing you say it that way, my audience might receive it a bit better. Because I've been saying death is a choice for forever.
Yeah.
That it's as simple as choosing to live. Far too often, we allow life to happen to us rather than choosing the life we want to experience. And that leads to people believing that everything that happens is God wants that to happen to you.
I'm gonna
And
turn some toes, but yeah, keep going.
yeah, so it's like it's really bad. Like I started off as a Christian, and that's one of the beliefs we were kind of coached into is whether it's good or bad, it's all God. Just submit to God's will. Whatever happens is God's will. It's sovereign. And that made sense up until I started thinking, and then that didn't make sense anymore. And I'm like, no, 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 something's off here. I feel like there's a component missing. We have free will to choose. We're living radios. We choose every day, every moment what station we want to be in.
Precisely.
Have you ever seen the video where there's this Asian guy and he has some tuning forks and they're all tuned to different frequencies? And he has one, let's say it's 440, and the other that's 432. And then he has an extra one, which is, let's just say 440 as well. Well, when he taps the one that's 440 and he brings it close to the 432 and nothing happens. He taps that same one and brings it close to the one that it's tuned for. It resonates without him having to touch it. We literally experience the world that we want every day, even if we don't think we want it. That's what we're ordering. It's kind of like I like Neville Goddard's presentation where he's like, you go to a restaurant, you don't just walk in and say, what do y'all feel like giving away today? It's like, no, you go in, you order what you want, and if you don't like it, you send it back. Same thing with life. We far too often, in his words, careless things happen and we accept it rather than asking for something better. Send it back.
Send it back.
But you had
That's
something you were going to add in.
Yeah, I usually choose to not speak on topics of immortality to my audience because you can see how blocked they are to the concept. And I have theories about it. I might be wrong. I might be right in some cases, but my theory is when people say, "Oh, aging is beautiful, let it happen," or "It's supposed to happen, you're supposed to die, it just wasn't his time," all that stuff. No. So basically, I think, I might be out of line saying this, I apologize if I am, but I think they've had an experience that has frozen their belief systems. That's decided for them. Maybe that's how they coped when a loved one passed away, by saying the same stuff over and over and over again. If that helped them, fine. But you got to understand that saying those things, or even believing in those things, does put a clock on your lifespan. There are numerous experiences where people choose to either remember themselves being young for 5 days only, their arthritis disappears. These are people that are in the 70s and 80s. Arthritis disappears, their vision improves. Some of them don't need their glasses anymore. Did I mention that their limbs limber up and they can move like they used to? They take blood tests, and this isn't just a one-off experiment. They've done this a lot with old people. They take the blood tests and they've actually aged backwards. You know what I mean? They put them in an environment where they expect to be young, either up here or in an environment that's like their childhood environment. Literally, they rebuild their home in some cases. And their brain now expects them to be a specific age. And then their body course corrects and then makes them live longer. Our whole society believes in death and dying at the age of 70, if you're lucky, or having a heart attack at 50, especially in the States. And some people are getting it younger than in their 30s, you know?
Yeah.
And so if you have that expectation, what do you think the body's going to do? If you only visualize yourself being a certain age in the same way that these older people visualize themselves being in their early 20s, the body's going to start shutting down. And Joe Dispenza talks about this really well. There are other books as well by Leonard Orr that also talk about this in a very scientific way. It's not woo-woo. It's all about epigenetics and how the expectation of yourself, or at least the image you hold of yourself, can downregulate your genes and make you sick, or upregulate them and make you healthy.
Yeah.
I really didn't want this camera to do this today, but it should fix itself momentarily. To each their own, unfortunately.
Yeah. Pretty much. And I hate to bring them up again, but like I didn't bring them up in this recording, but like Rockefeller, when he said he wanted a country of workers instead of thinkers, and then all the things that we have today, specifically in the States, are a direct result of the Rockefeller Foundation from exactly 100 years ago that taught death as a culture. So we have 100 years of people who've been taught that death is supposed to happen and it's waiting around every corner.
Some
and that
scientists,
it's inescapable, you know? Even like what you were saying about the science, that scientifically, like if they look in the biology of humans, there's no reason for us to die. It just happens because the body is self-healing and self-regenerating. Everything about it, even the soul, is self-healing. It has to be continuously indoctrinated into killing itself, which is why I've also said that all death is suicide.
They call that the death urge. Yeah, that subconscious inclination towards leaning towards death, as well as mentally believing in it, or leaning towards not wanting to wake up in the morning. That can be enough. You know, yeah. I think it's interesting how the different areas of the world. We're talking about India, we're talking about Christianity, we're talking about some areas of science and the placebo effect, essentially. It's interesting how they also kind of swing into Indian tradition and the root chakra being the thing that keeps us together, keeps the cells together. They say that if you wake up and you don't want to live, or you're not looking forward to anything, that malfunctions and you fall apart. So there's that too. And when you look at how to fix the root chakra and how you should be thinking to fix the root chakra, if you change your thinking to fix your root chakra, because it's as of a direct result, the conditions of the root chakra are as of a direct result of your thinking, your life gets better. It becomes something, or an environment that you want to live in. It becomes quite interesting. And if you deal with each chakra from a more psychological standpoint, your life automatically gets better, much better. And you get more energy for it too, which is interesting.
Yeah. That's great. It's one of the things that's becoming a lot more popular is people becoming more comfortable with talking about immortality. It's something that I believe most of the people on the planet subconsciously believe shouldn't be here. But more than not, we've been taught to accept it since we were kids.
Apparently, you're not supposed to talk about it if you're practicing. It has the opposite effect. So I can't say I'm practicing, but there are people out there that are.
Like in South Africa, my spiritual father, he was one of the few people that taught on it. He died 7 times. Major car accidents, died from cancer 3 times, I want to say. He always taught death was a choice. So he died, they pronounced him dead. Like one of the bigger ones was like a major car accident. He was dead on the scene. And well, he was in the hospital, not the hospital bed, but the in the stretcher in the back of the ambulance. and was standing next to his body and said, "Why am I over there when I'm right here?" He didn't really get it because he didn't know all the lingo we have today. He's like, "Well, I need to get back in there and go home. I have stuff I got to do." And he got back in his body and hopped up and went back. So he did that a lot, where something would happen and he just choose to come back and finish what he had to do. uh,
That's it.
Even was able to get a lot of miracles done on his way into the grave a few times.
You talk about that. What did he get done?
I'm
Did he tell
sorry,
you
I
what they
didn't hear
were?
you.
Let's talk about that. What did he get done? The miracles.
So one of the miracles, so he was known for healing. One of the times when he would do monthly like mass healing services. So pretty much
Mm.
the whole country would try to stuff itself into his church. And during this particular event, he was dying of cancer again. So he was barely standing, barely living, but he was like, "All right, everyone with crutches and wheelchairs and whatever, stand up. And I want you to throw your crutches on the ground and say bye-bye." And once they did that, he was like, "All right, now walk." Well, of course, all the people that came that day, they got healed. They started walking around. But what he didn't know is that there was a guy that they brought that had died, because he was known for raising the dead too. When he said get up and walk, the guy got up and walked. So he accidentally did a dead raising while he's up there dying of cancer for the second time.
Oh, man. Yeah. Yeah.
So let's see. We're getting a little low on time. Do you have anything that any final words you'd like to leave with the audience?
Mm. Final words.
Actually, I thought of one thing that could be a great final question.
Sure.
When people are having these astral encounters, they're meeting with other beings, what would you say are some of the red flags that they could look for to say that this thing doesn't necessarily have my best interest at heart? I'm not dealing with something that actually loves me. I might actually be in danger.
The eyes. There are certain beings that try to shapeshift to fool us. They can't. They can't keep their eyes in check. They start moving around like crazy. And yeah, the eyes. Check out the eyes. Also, don't think everyone around you is your friend. Mm-mm. No. Think of it in terms of going to a new city for the first time. You got some good people on the street. You got some bad people. Every dimension's, well, not every dimension, but a lot of them are like that. It's just like ours in a lot of ways. So don't just start speaking to everyone that you see. My golden rule is speak to those who come to you, and that's it, really. Astral project throughout the day so that you don't bump into any negative beings, and you should be fine. Don't give out your address. Don't say you're from Earth. You'll attract too much attention. And keep a mirror in your room, because mirrors, although they're seen as bad, are actually brilliant. They can reveal entities that are invisible in the astral plane. And so if you're in the astral plane and you're looking around the room and you think you're by yourself, if you just look in your mirror, you'll see a whole bunch of things. Probably. Not always. But if there's something in there lurking around, you'll see it. Same thing goes for any type of glamour they're putting on you. Perhaps they're trying to make themselves look attractive or normal. You know, again, the eyes go crazy, but to see them more in detail, just look in the mirror. You'll see right through their disguise and you'll see what they look like. Also, this is a really important one. Please listen to me. Even if they're putting out light and love vibes, don't just run with that. There are a lot of beings out there that can project false emotions and hide their true feelings. Use a mirror, or still be cautious when you're speaking to them, or develop the ability to read their mind. Then you can plow right through their consciousness and find their true feelings. The ones that are light and love and are your spirit guides, they're going to catch you going into their mind, and they might be okay with it. They might let you into their mind. But these types of beings, you'll notice they're on a different caliber. They're quite good. And so the lower vibrational ones are quite bad at fooling people. Just make sure that you're aware enough and conscious enough, and you've got a good sense about you to test them before running into their arms or going off to wherever they want to take you, or saying yes to anything. Yeah, they want to make deals with people a lot of the times. If they want to make a deal with you, it's not a good being, you know? So I've noticed good guides, spirit guides, angels even, when they help you, they're not asking for anything back. They're not asking you, hey, do you need my help? They will help you and then leave. So there's that. Also, if something is pulling you out of your body, it's probably not good. If it's taking you by the hand and pulling you up out of the body, it's pushing you or like touching you, it's probably not good. Good beings, when they pull you out of the body, they don't pull you. They signal to you that you're in the astral realm by knocking on the door politely or saying your name from outside of the room so that you're not too freaked out. They won't be up in your face or whispering in your ear. If you're going to do this stuff, don't do it for any reason that's bad. Don't do it for a power trip. Don't do it because you want to be, you know, don't do anything like that because it's just going to ruin your life. You'll put your frequency will be so off that you'll attract the wrong beings in the astral plane. They will fill your head up with power and ideas of power at a cost. So be wary of that. There is a bright side to all of this, a good side to astral projection. But you have to be vibrating right first to then go to the right places and meet the right beings. That's really important. And so work on your mindset first before you even try, and really think about why you want to do it. If it's for egotistical reasons, forget about it. If it's for exploratory reasons, maybe you're just interested. Sure, go for it. If you feel like you're more than human, not an alien, none of that stuff. The internet likes to, again, fill our heads up with, are you a starseed? Are you this and that and the third thing? But if you have a deep feeling inside you that there's more to life, perhaps every time you look up at the stars, you feel like that's home. Again, not that there's a planet out there with your address on it, like your previous address, but that you feel like you're made out of stardust. There's an intimate connection that we will share with everything around us. That's really real. If you have those types of feelings, if you feel, how can I put it? If you feel like having normal, mundane conversations with people are boring, that's a good one. If maybe you're noticing that people live on a cyclical kind of pattern and there's no depth to them, and you feel like you should be experiencing a certain depth with your interactions, something other, then you're probably the right person for astral projection and or spirituality, you know? So just, yeah, use a bit of common sense and you'll be fine. Otherwise, you'll be corrected very quickly by everything else out there.
That's great. So where can people find you? Where can people connect with you?
I have a YouTube channel at the moment. Heads or tails on what I'm going to do with it. If I'm going to continue it or make a new one. I'm feeling pulled towards something else, but we'll see. I also have a website called ryancropper.com where I have courses on how to leave the body, starter kits for the mind, because the psychology of everything is so important, or your psychology is so important for every type of ability. I have coaching. Brother, like, this is where it's kind of weird. Spiritual life coaching, I guess you can call it that. I like to deal with the mind a lot. Anything that gets in the way of spiritual progression, I can discuss how to get rid of it, or we can get rid of it. It just depends on what it is. I have a series of services on my website specifically for the kind of unblocking of the mind and changing of the personality a little bit so that you're vibrating right for these types of experiences. If you want anything that's not on there, you can just book the spiritual life coaching one. It's kind of like a default for anything. That's if you'd like. At the moment, I'm doing long-term astral projection coaching, and I have a nice handful of students that are about 5 or 6 weeks in at the moment. If most of them have astral projected already. One on his first day, which was insane. That's what I'm mostly focused on at the moment. second to developing another ability. But you can find those there. Pretty much there's something there for everyone. And if you can't afford things, I try to be accommodating when it comes to everyone's budget. And I'm definitely not the most expensive person out there. But if you want free stuff, I have a whole playlist on my YouTube channel with like 40 videos, numerous techniques that I give out for free for people to experience the astral realms. Yeah, just proceed with caution. You should be good.
Awesome. Well, Ryan, it's been great having you on today. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, no problem. It's been fun. Yeah.
All right. Well, that concludes this episode of The Inner. Until next time, y'all be blessed.